It's great to be back at Quarry Farm, yes. And I was here in September last year. And I want to thank Joe very much for inviting me to be part of this reading, the first poetry reading in this series ever. So that's a real exciting and nice honor to have. And I also want to thank the Center for Mark Twain Studies for granting me the fellowship that allowed me to live in the house for 2 weeks. And I was given the fellowship for my photography, actually. But of course, I wrote poetry, and you were here for academic reasons, and Jim wrote poetry. So there's something about the place, you know, definitely. So whenever I give a reading, I always like to start with somebody else's poem to honor the tradition of poetry and to expand, you know, poems to other people. And I'm going to do that today, but I'm not going to read the poem. I actually invited a good friend of mine and poet, Bart White, who was part of a group that came here, and you'll hear more about that during my program. But he's going to read a poem that he wrote about Quarry Farm here. Okay, so Bart White, and Bart's from Rochester, came all the way down from Rochester.
Yeah. Hey, Michael, thank you for your generosity in inviting me to share a poem here tonight. It's an honor to read in this place with you and Joe Plath, and thanks to our hosts, Joe Lamack and Steve Webb. So this poem is House Servant to Mark Twain, and I'd like to dedicate it to Mary Ann Cord. Samuel Clemens called her Aunt Rachel. House Servant to Mark Twain. On his porch, she drops her smile when the beaming host declares, Aunt Rachel is the sunniest soul I've ever met. Nothing in life has troubled her. Is you in earnest, Mr. C? She says quietly, daring to address him. I have seen my share of trouble. Well then, tell the good folks gathered here. The day, she begins, and halts. Go on, the young writer coaxes his servant. Speak. Evening shadows the house. The guests are listening now. Mary wrenches out her sentence. That day my mistress auctioned my husband and babies to different masters. From Mary's agony, Huck was born, or rather the American character's moment of truth, born along the mighty river that split the nation, on his little raft beneath the keen eyes of the slave catchers. The child must choose. Will he protect or betray his friend? Thanks.
Thank you, Bart. Yes, thank you. So for my program, I'm going to show some photos and actually present haiga. And haiga is a Japanese form of art where it combines images and haiku, or images and poetry. Originally, it was a lot of poets were painters also in Japan a long time ago. They would maybe do a painting and then add a haiku onto the painting, or sometimes another poet would add that. And this evolved, and there's a lot of people who do create haiga now around the world. And basically, simply, it's combining an image with words, with a poem. And I've been writing haiku since the 1970s. And in Japan, it's 575. And I was writing, and most people back then were writing 575 syllables in English. But really, in Japan, it's vowel sounds, 575 vowel sounds. And that doesn't really correspond to 575 syllables. So I've shifted, and Tom Clausen, he's a wonderful haiku poet from Ithaca. We had at an all-day poetry event recently. And he's been writing haiku since the 80s, and very, very good. But he didn't like the controversy where, is it haiku or not? Is it 575 or it shouldn't be? So what he does, he just calls them little poems. He writes little poems. So I'm going to share some little poems and my experience at Quarry Farm. And I was here, like I said, September 8th through the 19th. And I'm going to show the photo, let you look at it for a few seconds, take it in, and then I'll share the little poem. First morning, unexpected gift waiting for me. And I walked out the door, and there's the gift for me. It's like, gift giver, do I really want to say thank you? And Greg was here. I got to say hi to Greg here, but it's like I was honored, a gift like that, right? First morning, unexpected gift appeared for me. And this was that first morning, not long after the shrew. And every morning I would have my pot of tea in the morning on the veranda, of course. And I went, and this is just stepping around the veranda, looking off and it was magical. It was just really magical. So 2 gifts in just a few hours, a couple of hours of being here in the morning. And of course, the steps. How many steps taken on these did he walk? And I was really entranced with the steps, and just like every day he would walk up and down those. And I thought it was really... Is there some talk about restoring these at all? Yeah. Yeah, okay, cool. This was second morning. Beautiful, but not magical like yesterday. But it is beautiful, isn't it? Just... And my daughter, only one. He had 3. And I thought my daughter came up to visit me at lunchtime, and we had a wonderful talk on the veranda, a nice lunch. And I thought about how, when he was here all those years, all those summers, he had his daughters here, And of course they were younger, and over the years, they kept getting, growing older and that. And I just thought of that little connection. Well, there's my daughter, my one daughter. Another steps. Steps lead to where so many words were written. And of course, these are the steps up to where the study was. I think you probably all know that very well. And they just intrigued me. And of course, you go up to where the study was, and all those darn trees that keep growing. It's like, it's so different than when he was here with the study and the open views. And of course, I had to go to Woodlawn and visit, which I had done a number of times previous, visiting the gravesite there. And no pretentiousness, just 2 names he was known by. And that fascinated me too. Nothing elaborate, nothing big, just Samuel Langhorne Clemens, Mark Twain, and the dates. And I wanted to find the Ellerslie chimney, right? The children's playhouse chimney. And this is, early on the stay here. And so I went up above the quarry, I went up there, and I got accosted by a dog. And this dog comes running up to me and barking and growling. I go, uh-oh, And then its owner came by. It's a neighbor here to Quarry Farm. Steve, who was that again?
Lori.
Yeah, okay. And she came over and we got talking. She quieted the dog down. That was fine. And I said, yeah, I was interested in finding this chimney. And she goes, oh, I know where it is, right? So I followed her and we walked together. And I realized, though, as we got to the chimney, this isn't the playhouse, because this is quite a ways away. And I knew the playhouse wasn't there. And so this, and correct me if I'm wrong, Joe or Steve, or if anyone else knows, was this John Lewis's only speculation. Will we ever know? And is that true, that we think it's John Lewis's?
We'd like to think it is.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so this is accurate, speculation, and will we ever know for sure, right? But I'm always fascinated, just in general, when I'm out in nature and I see remnants of civilization that's being overtaken by the natural world. And this is the group of 6. And I invited 6 poets to come up for the day, and Bart White was one of them. Boy, this has really got a red tint. The photos aren't quite this red. I'm thinking, boy, yeah, I've been sunburned. Yeah, the tinting is not the way the photos actually are, okay? And anyway, we spent the day together, came up, had lunch together, shared words of Mark Twain's over lunch, and then we all just went about and did some writing for the afternoon, got together for dinner, and had dinner. Then we shared what we wrote sitting on the veranda, like Mark Twain always did. You know, after supper, go out there and share words. So we sat there on the veranda sharing words and sipping a little Scotch whiskey. And that was his favorite drink. And I'm not a whiskey guy, really, you know, but I said, oh, we got to have some Scotch whiskey. So, and I've got a picture of a few of the people. Well, 6 other poets gathered at Quarry Farm. Memorable. And it really was. And Bart took this photo. And that's G.S. Murphy reading from his journal on the veranda. And that's John Roberts. He came up from Scranton and reading from his journal what he wrote. And this is Casey Winston, who is here, and she's going to come up and read a poem of hers from Quarry Farm.
Hi, my name is Casey Winston, and I grew up here in the Elmira area, so I grew up reading all of Mark Twain's works and visiting Quarry Farm on field trips, and even had Michael as my poetry instructor when I was in 4th grade. So it's kind of come full circle. I'm a poet also, and some of you might know that Mark Twain referred to this place as Do As You Please Hall. He wanted his daughters to come up here and just have a lot of fun and create adventure and not wear their shoes and go out on the roof. And so this poem is called Do As You Please Hall, and inspired by that concept of freedom and adventure he instilled in his daughters when they were here. Gentle breeze tosses my long hair around my face. The mountainous views jump up from the slope in front of me. A view of the Chemung River Valley, historic in nature, historic to Elmira. I lean back, close my eyes, and let the history, the memory wash over me. Do as you please, I hear a gentle whisper in my ear. Eyes wide, I look forward. I look for the source of the command. Nothing. No one. Do as you please, whispers the voice again, urging me to let go and fall into myself. So I do. Eyes close as I sink into the 100-year-old wicker chair. Soft giggles fill my ears. Giggles turn to laughter as I let the curious embrace of history and memory surround me. 3 young girls come running across the porch where I sit, clothed in dresses, with bare feet, hair ribbons askew as they chase each other and shout, "I beat you, I beat you!" A woman in a light but full gown, looking hot on this summer day, shouts, "Girls, time for lunch." The girls come running, screaming and giggling, tripping over each other as they make their way to the door, jumping into the waiting arms of their mother. I am transported back to the large slab stone porch, Elmira just visible through the waving trees. "Do as you please," whispers the voice one last time. I smile, content to become the newest memory of this old house of Quarry Farm, otherwise known as Do As You Please Hall. For now, I am a small part of this house's history, just like Mark Twain and his family. Thank you.
A little, no picture or poem here, but just a little experience. Well, let me just go back for a moment. The person on the left next to Bart with their thumb up, and that's Tamar. And Tamar was, one of the 6 poets. She came from New Jersey, used to live in Corning. And she stayed the night at Quarry Farm that night. And she stayed in the bedroom down the hall from where I was, and she was nervous. You know, the house is a little inspiring in certain ways, you know, and she was really concerned. So before she went to bed, she had me open all the doors nearby and look in the drawers even, you know, and she was okay. So middle of the night, I'm sleeping, and I get woken up. Michael! I'm awake, and I'm listening. Nothing else, no other sound. I go, I was thinking it's Tamar, but it's quiet. So I went back to sleep. That morning, I was out on the veranda having my tea, and Tamar comes down. I said, Tamar, did you call me in the middle of the night? She goes, no, I slept solid. I go, So then, a few days later, nobody was in the house, and I was taking a nap, and Michael! And this was a woman's voice, and nothing else. And then the next day, again, I was taking a nap, and Michael! Nothing else. And then one more night, it was middle of the night, nobody else was in the house. Michael! I go, what? And nothing. It's like, I know Jim's got some experiences he had here too, so I'm sure there have been many other experiences like that. So I wanted weather when I was here. And it was dry the whole time. It was mostly sunny. And this was it. Only day of weather while I was here. Fog, that was it, you know. And there's a quote, I was doing my research before coming here. This is Mark Twain. When the storms sweep down the remote valley and the lightning flashes above the hills beyond and the rain beats on the roof over my head, imagine the luxury of it. I had no luxury. This was it, fog. And I love the fog. It makes me think of the coast of Maine where I've lived a bit too. And fog is fascinating. Fog of time, what was once clear, somewhat blurred. Ephemeral fog, solid stone wall, his contradictions. And this was, I was there the last days of summer. It was through the 19th of September, so not quite fall yet. A little bit of fall color. And this, as I was sitting on the veranda, every once in a while a leaf would come down. And I was able to get a picture of the leaf in midair. Suspended in space, Halley's Comet bracketed his life. 1835, 1910. The cigar box and the cigar, right? And the last words on here is the letter he wrote to somebody compiling a book, was talking about when he's working at Quarry Farm, 5 hours, and he'll smoke maybe 15 cigars in 5 hours. But if he's really inspired, it might be even more. And so this made me think of cigar at 15, vomited plums afterwards, never smoked again. And I was so glad that happened, because I never smoked again, but seeing that made me think of it, you know. And Casey has organized a workshop here. We've done, and I facilitated 3 times now in the evening, once, for a couple of hours, and writers are invited to come up. And we did one of them while I was in residence here. And this is B.B. Bryan, a Pennsylvania painter. And she asked me, could I come up and paint and not write, during the writing workshop? Can I paint? Of course you could. So this is her painting. Not just words inspired from here, artwork too. And that's her painting of obviously what it is. Yeah, beautiful painting. This is a postcard that she had done. Poetry night at Quarry Farm. in the veranda at night. Just the nice weather, at least I was able to be on the veranda a lot. You know, I didn't have that pelting rain coming in or being too cold or anything. It was, and the veranda is such a magical, this space where he shared words. Now this is the Ellerslie chimney. And that's the one I wanted to find the first time. And I was thinking, I still want to find it. And I remember talking to Steve, and I said, yeah, I want to. He goes, well, should I let you know where it is? I said, no, I want to find it on my own, right? And I looked at one of the old photographs and saw that behind the playhouse was a little bit of a stone wall, you know, the cliff and that. So I said, it's not up above, it's down below. And sure enough, there I found it. And this one in much better condition than the possibly John Lewis's chimney. This chimney, all that's left of Children's Playhouse. And again, the veranda, 2 glasses there. That was actually plum wine. And Casey took this picture. She took this picture. Picture of me, dark figure in glow of light. And that veranda really was, it was beautiful any time of the day, but at night, a little bit of lights shining, it really was magical. And this was the last evening. The low sun out there in the west, angling in. Last evening, late day sun, shadow memories. And that last day I lingered a bit that morning, you know, it's not easy to leave. You know, after being here for 12 days and just having this wonderful experience, it was just not easy to leave, you know. And so it's really nice to be back up here today again, you know, just for this little bit of time too. But when Joe mentioned that 48 state tour I did, and that was in 2013, and it was, you know, 14 weeks on the road, giving readings in every state. And a week into the journey, my dear friend Rhonda, who's here, my dear friend Rhonda sent me an email. And it was a quote by Dogen, and Dogen was a Zen master, you know, from, I think, maybe the 12th century or so. And she sent me this quote. Don't ask me where it is I travel as I wander through this limitless life where every step I take is home. And I really love that, and I do feel that way as I travel, but Quarry Farm was home for 12 days, but no, it's home for the rest of my life from having had this experience. So thank you. Thank you.
All right, let's see how this works. Michael, do you have books with you that if anybody wants to buy?
Yeah, there's a few books there.
Copies there? Okay. Yeah, because I have copies of this that I lugged with me on the airplane from Bloomington, Illinois, and at the suggestion of 3 baggage handlers in 3 different airports, I'm going to offer them at a discounted rate so they don't have to see them again. As you heard before, I went to Quarry Farm to do an essay on how Mark Twain modeled being a professional writer for John Updike. My thinking was that he embraced the role of spokesperson for American literature and culture. He embraced the lecture circuit and the book circuit. He traveled internationally. He wrote about minutiae and, you know, things that appeal to the average Americans. Twain wrote about barbers, Updike beer cans, you know. And so when you start putting all these things together, it's a pretty interesting thing to think about. I'm also a Hemingway scholar, and I thought, for crying out loud, he did that too. And so the 2 men that were arguably the most successful in terms of their professional and their critical literary lives, both, I think, owe a big debt to Twain. And I've got plenty of quotes to prove it, just not here. Because something happened while I was at Quarry Farm. First of all, if you ever get the great honor to stay here, there are hazards that I should warn you about. The first is solitude, and it is, you're alone. If you're alone in this big old house, you know it. And it's dark. If you come from a city and there's some remote light anywhere, I mean, it's here, forget it. Distractions. there are plenty of distractions. Rabbit Holes is the title of one of my poems, because all of a sudden you're reading about 13th century whatever, and you're just, I'm looking at the same cigar box, as you did, and I'm thinking, okay, now I got to look up cigars. I'm looking up Potier and Stuymas furniture, and what do I care about that? I do. Suddenly I care, right? So there's distractions because there's so much there. And speaking of so much, the resources are so overwhelming that you're left with, oh my God, where do I start? How do I do this? And finally, there's that pressure to produce. In my own case, I'm not only a scholar, I'm also a creative writer. And so I came with different projects that I thought I would work on. I had a short story collection in progress. I had a poetry book in progress. And instead, I couldn't get a thing written, not word one. And it was only after I read Roughing It, which was the one book that Twain wrote in the parlor before he was exiled to his ultra chic octagonal place to write. And I started reading, and I started jotting down quotes from Roughing It that really felt interesting to me. And before I knew it, I was using those poems, these epigraphs rather, as epigraphs to my poems. And I had written maybe 2 poems when suddenly it hit me. I says, you know what? I said I would come here to do Twain and Updike, and I will. And so I would start each morning by researching Twain and Updike. And then around noon, I'd take a lunch break, and then I would start researching the family, which is what I really wanted to read about. I'd start researching the house. I'd start reading more and more. And then at nighttime, I would just write. I would write poems. And so the poems that comprise At Quarry Farm were begun at Quarry Farm. They, of course, went through stages of revision. So let me just jump in here. I was struck, and you talk about side tours and detours and just being kind of flummoxed by the whole thing. I was amazed that this rug had been in storage. It had been used during Twain's time. Mark Twain walked on it. I said, can I walk on it? Can people really walk on it? And I'm told yes. And so I'm walking on the same rug as Mark Twain. So I think, how crazy is that? And as the house is, in daytime, the house is great. It's very interesting. But then all of a sudden, as darkness settles in, what I'm doing is I'm just giving you the titles of poems so I don't have to waste time reading them. To be the only one alive in an old house that's dead is unsettling, especially on Halloween weekend. Radiators make for poor company. Each clank an invader somewhere in the house. Cold peers through keyholes. Darkness penetrates thoughts. You're the sock in the dryer that disappears, and there's no help in remembering the Gilded Age baron who bought this house had died a year later, couldn't really enjoy it with family he loved. Is it he that I sense in unsettling gloom, or am I my own worst companion? And there, of course, were the pictures that, when I was here in 2023, hung in the dining room. And those since have been moved, and we have instead The Poor Girl and The Rich Girl, 2 paintings that Twain bought abroad. And that leads me to, this morning I set the microwave clock behind 1 hour. I am sensitive to time in a place such as this. An intruder from the present, each step a trespass. The first floor rooms here and everything in them droop heavy with history, and no match I can strike could impress those who lived here once upon a time. It seems I am always encroaching. No knock on the head transported me here. I came willingly, hoping Twain's past would rub off on my dwindling present. Here I'm distracted, not by fair maiden or errant squire, but by the gap between people alive then and now, wondering if evolution is still on the right track, or if total solitude ever was good. This evening is exactly like the morning. I am becoming one of them. The key-wound regulator on the wall has been stuck since God knows when at 11:45. Outside, trees bend toward panes of wavy glass, as if listening for some sort of life inside this metronomic mansion. Midnight is always approaching. I think I love the kitchen. The kitchen was my place, my favorite spot, because I could eat and drink in the kitchen. The kitchen and the front porch, the only places where you could eat and drink. And of course, I was in the house of a teetotaler, so that was really great. Break fast. Old house radiators always clank, but at Quarry Farm, they're mostly nocturnal. Deep forest owls that swoop across meadows of sleep. By morning, it turns out, they're tired too. Haunting is a full-time job. In the kitchen, I toast myself awake at the very table where Twain began mornings, stretching maples outside the window, the day breezy but sunny side up. Of course, he'd be a ham and eggs kind of guy, not some mealy-mouthed cereal eater. An 1860s cast-iron stove still hulks, floor to ceiling, custom-made for beloved cook Marianne Cord, an imposing woman, 65 years a slave. Her story of separation from husband, 7 children, still hangs in the air, her presence here strong and stirring as Twain's. I like to think he engaged Auntie Cord in chatter because of an egalitarian nature, and not to mine her gold with more success than he had as a young man with Carson City silver. In this abolitionist house, both cook and patriarch had been conductors on the underground, one of them even sheltering northbound Frederick Douglass. Staring at this iron monolith over jitter-free coffee, I can't help but think how breakfast here feels like Sunday, full of reverence, heavy with martyrdom, bright with stubborn faith and inspiration. That stove is probably my favorite piece in the entire house. It's just incredible. And that's the letter that was sent to the widow of Jervis Langdon after he passed from Frederick Douglass, thanking him for sheltering. As I write, wind kneads the upstairs windows, so roughly that any half-baked thoughts I have fall flat. If Twain were alive, maybe we'd tap that secret stash of beer he hid, not well enough, in the house of a temperance woman who tempered expectations as Sister Livy and her family summered each year after their father died. A promise Twain kept joyfully, his love of place walking hand in hand. When he wrote Roughing It in Susan Crane's parlor, Twain's vice of choice was cigars, chain smoked as he scrawled, puffing away on a 20 to 30 a day habit. Whatever signals were in those smoke rings, any nuggets of wisdom detritus are gone, as was Twain in a puff of smoke after St. Susan constructed a gazebo-like study for him to work in quiet on the next ridge, far, far away from her house. This has changed, of course, from Twain's time. I actually was going to use one from his time, or close to it, but this is about my experience at Quarry Farm, and so that's why that's there. That table, of course, you see him working on in the photo in the study, and that table is in the parlor. I've been out west. Even panned for gold in California and killed a rattlesnake headed my way. Been shot at twice, but never stood toe-to-toe with an outlaw, unless mirrors count. And maybe I shouldn't have streaked that night on a whim and a bet. But 2 days in jail was as close as I came to being a bad man living in bad lands, except if raiding a Utah turkey farm counts, or leaving a friend to hitchhike home with a deer rifle, wearing a bright orange vest after he cursed at me from the top of a ridge. Soul searching never does any good when your soul isn't wanting to be found. I imagine that's how Twain felt recalling his own stories in the parlor of a home where refined people only tolerated his controlled burn and boozing, his Old West-style cussing, chuffing a mile and a half up the hill to the farm and leaving a locomotive trail of smoke behind him while the rest of the family cared for his ailing wife at the mansion in town. He was roughing it all over again. But so, I imagine, were they. I'm a primarily visual poet. I do a lot with transformational lines, and so I really depend on people being able to see it on the page. And especially writing these poems, I found myself pulled even more toward narrative than a Midwesterner usually is. And we're really pulled toward narrative. Because I had two stories to tell, Twain's and everybody in the house, and my own. And in a way, what I did and what I came up with was a poetic journal meant to be read one poem right after the next, whereas usually poems don't work that way in a book. You can kind of skip around here, there, and everywhere. So this one is a sonnet, but you wouldn't know it to hear me read it. He's here somewhere, for if you trust in heaven, then you must also believe in spirits. And wouldn't it be just like Sam C., who would gleefully relieve himself of any social custom, to thumb his nose at finality, refusing to leave his world of tall tales and vices, not succumb, even if his lot of late had been to grieve? Could it be his presence I feel here in rooms hardly changed from the weave of family work and play at Quarry Farm, where he struck gold, managed to overachieve? A swirl, gold catches in a watery pan. Belief is catch as catch can. His presence is everywhere. I was positioned in Susan Crane's bedroom, and that's where I was. And but of course, I couldn't resist at least lying down in the room where Twain slept, and that's where this came from. The bedrooms of others inspire quiet, reverence even, whether there's a whiff of the illicit, a bouquet of fame, or a lingering haze of the mundane, especially in older houses where the past is a building never to be raised. Before hospice care, people expired right where they perspired to start new lives. Old houses hold all the glittering secrets a chest so large can contain. Maybe that's why it's always so-and-so slept here, not so-and-so ate here, laughed here, shouted here. Because someone asleep, Twain, let's say, is most vulnerable, or close as he'll come to humanity in its purest, most universal state. Aren't sleeping babies at their sweetest? While even slumbering adults betray no grating habits, impulses, or prejudices to irritate or unnerve? Twain awake was a planet of unpredictable patterns of sunshine, mist, thunderclaps, and rainbows. Even here, during 20 of his happiest summers, after working all day, he'd come down from the mount maybe feeling like Moses, ready to read them a few commandments or break a few, even frolic with the cats or blow smoke-filled bubbles again for the girls. He could still be irritable. In sleep, a person can do no good and no harm, a comfort for others, like the relief that comes when an annoying wind-up toy finally winds down or breaks. Merciful mitigation. Maybe that's it. Bedrooms and their suggestion of temporary repose remind us subconsciously of permanent rest, even at party houses where those rooms are still curiously hushed and coats end up in a communal jumble that might as well come with an iron fence and caretaker. The cover of my book, by the way, is the window from Twain's bedroom. All right. Now we get into the nitty-gritty that Michael was talking about before. Saturday morning television was my Mississippi River, a same but varied, never-ending flow of stories and adventures that became my guide to life as I knew it. I remember still an intro to commercials on the campy Rocky and Bullwinkle show. The moose dressed like a swami, hands hovering over a crystal ball. Eeny beeny, chilly beany, these spirits are about to speak. Are they friendly spirits? The flying squirrel asks. Friendly, just listen. Cut to commercial. It's rattling around in my mind now like a marble on a roulette wheel, because I've landed on a spirit problem I need to solve or remain unsettled after dark as the child I once was. At first I thought at random when I felt a chill passing from one upstairs workspace to another, like the reverse horror of wading through a patch of warm water in a public pool. Smells followed, and I Googled my memory to recall sweet cigar smoke. Not even cheap ones smacked of fried potatoes. Could it be the cook? In Scooby-Doo mysteries, the ghost was always the caretaker, and the one here raised his hand. Probably him cooking in an adjacent apartment. At 10 p.m.? No, he said, adding, if it was a spirit, his money was on Twain's sister-in-law. After all, it was her house, and I was sleeping in her bedroom. Or maybe it's not a person at all. Twain's daughter did say, everything here is so full of the past. The cherry tree, the air, the odors, the sounds of summer, everything is so suggestive of a time long ago that one feels overwhelmed with a cloud of sorrow. At night, it almost seems unendurable. At my own daughter's suggestion, I began talking aloud, apologizing for whatever I've done to upend or offend, even assuring, hey, I'll be gone in one more week. But afterwards feeling sheepish as the guy banging pots in the woods because buddies had told him it was how to bag snipe. Had I just bamboozled myself? I doubt my subconscious is clever enough to stage such a ruse. Saturday morning has its limits. So do I, and I wondered if music could be used to drive loiterers from malls. Why not here? Alison Krauss soothed my own restless spirit, so I fired off a few rounds. Afterwards, no pass-through chills, olfactory tricks, no haunting, not a single poof of paranoia. Next night, I reloaded with Gloria Estefan, singing in Spanish, wondering if the now calmed spirit might be music lover Clara Clemens. But once the episodes had stopped altogether, the who became irrelevant as the third act unmasking in Scooby-Doo. What mattered more was that, without really communicating, we had reached an understanding. It's Susan Crane's bedroom, and that mirror was brought over from the mansion. And when you sleep there, you just, it's like, do I close the door or do I leave it open? What way is safer? And do spirits pass through wood? And how does this work? I'm not sure I ever found out. But I sure was impressed. Impressed by everything that I read about Susan. You can't see it on the page, but this is written in the form of a villanelle. It's called Our Lady of the Flowers. The world can never have enough saints. Get in line, the queue's not very long. All it takes is a challenge to accept. For 60 years, Susan Crane prepared Park Church communion and furnished flowers. The world can never have enough saints. When Civil War vets returned to squalor, she marshaled an army of merciful relief. All it takes is a challenge to accept. Low-income minority children's cries were no match for one woman's big purse. The world can never have enough saints. Widowed Susan said yes to producing milk germ-free at her dairy, squashing typhoid. All it takes is a challenge to accept. Busy people make time for solutions. Drop the excuses and answer the call. The world can never have enough saints. All it takes is a challenge to accept. You go there and you see all these wonderful lives that they're living, all the things that they accomplish, and you walk away with one thought. I got to up my game, And I'm serious. I mean, you can't read about every single person, whether it's John T. Lewis or whether it's the cook or whether it's the daughters. It's like everyone is just so darned accomplished. It's inspiring. And so there are just some of the impressions here. The dairy displays here and there. The wallpaper from her bedroom that she had, Our Lady of the Flowers. She loved flowers, and you can see it all over the house. And of course, the church. And that takes us to the poor girl. In the painting, she watches all who pass a bronze sister sitting atop an empire clock in what was once the music room. Frozen in a Vermeer-like pose of routine, this poor girl is ostensibly engaged in doing the wash at a fountain, her face turned away from the task, and a wistful look betraying how far from here she really is. But the careful folds of her dress and the necklace and stacked headdress she wears, ill-suited for laundry, attest she was paid to pose, though the matter of her disengagement and inner calm is still genuine. Maybe that's why Twain bought the painting in Europe with his sister-in-law in mind. Everything Susan Crane did was honest and unvarnished, worthy of trust and admiration. Aristocratic herself, Susan at heart was peasant stock, comfortable among both rich and poor, a true humanist who remained tolerant and tranquil no matter what her brother-in-law said or did to try to get her to lose her temper. But it was only a game. Twain loved Susan, took long daily walks with her, no doubt saw her serene face in this canvas girl, both of them adept at measuring life so that something good was always within reach. And there you see the painting and the room that would have been the music room before it was expanded into an office. All right. Like Michael, I went up the hill. Unlike Michael, I was not ambitious enough to go stumbling off through tick-infested woods to try and find a chimney. I settled for this. And this was late October, early November, right? Having missed the herd every day thus far, I'm staked out, beer and camera in hand, ears pricked, ready for anything. My doors are open, all creatures welcome. And that goes double for the red foxes said to visit the farm. In the distance, a woodpecker taps waning light. Fall slows things down, lowers the heart rate, gets everything ready for the big slumber. Even Twain may have found it challenging to write this time of year in the spot where his study rested before it was gifted and moved because of vandals to Elmira College. It breathes easily now by the campus lake, around which groups of students slowly make their way toward classes, their wild lives on hold. Let's see where we're going next here. The location, of course. It being transported and where it is now. This is another, I think there are just a few poems left here, but this is another poem that, if I could find it here, where did I put that? Oh, here we go. All right, this is carved stone troughs. John Updike saw himself in a dogwood tree his parents planted the year he turned 1. Parents do such things. Twain's jus d'esprit led him to place 4 troughs in part sun along the farm on East Hill Road, so spaced to revive tired horses, and with their carvings mark the birth of 4 Clemens, who may have raced later to see whose was used, while dogs would bark. But when 3 of 4 children die before the father, those troughs become hollowed-out markers that bear the burden of emptiness, not crosses to inspire prayer or reflection. It's a wonder that Twain continued to care, funneling stone-cold grief into sage satire instead of yielding to alcohol and rage. I think there's 2 poems left, and thank you for your patience here. But now I gotta find it. I had these all marked, and then I changed the order. Okay, here we go. You're sitting in it, right? That's not the poem. My poem is a little longer. In fact, it's in sections. Section 1. The notched opening on the single door closest to the house was just small enough for the farm's 11 cats to come and go as they please, whether dining in or opting for carryout. If any were fat and lazy, Sam made them so, especially ones he named Sour Mash and Famine, who kept him company many days in his study. Susie wrote her father said if cholera ever comes, he'd take Sour Mash to the mountains. 2. Sounds coming from the barn. Whinnies and neighs, gentle mooing, lots of clucks, a few quacks, and braying from a donkey, Sam ordered especially for the girls, who also had a pet calf. Is it any wonder this getaway was their favorite place on earth? Their father joined them when he called it a day, went to the barn around 6 or so to look at the cows or take turns riding the donkey that threw him, the only time he tried. It was funny to the girls and ironic to the mugwump that he should be so mistreated by an animal that became the Democrats' mascot the same year the family began quarry farming. 3. Like the Clemens girls, our family summered with another, so I understand what it meant to trade concrete and congestion for rural relief. Our retreat was a lake cottage where we swam, rode, hunted frogs and turtles, water skied and bantered with adults who treated children differently when we were all away from our homes and routines. Play narrowed the gap between children and adults. 4. Because Livy was too sickly to walk much, it was Sam who took the girls on hikes and did silly things like performing elaborate costumed games of charades or organizing the cat parade which proceeded annually from the barn. First came old Minnie, great mother of cats, next Aunt Susan, Clara astride the donkey with a bundle of cats, then Sam and Jean holding hands, the remaining cats trailing, scratching out performances for judges, Livy and Susie. The latter once remarking, the difference between Papa and Mama is that Mama loves morals and Papa loves cats. 5. The carriages that journeyed up and down the steep hill were kept in the barn under a loft with a staircase so narrow and rickety that no one is allowed to climb it even now. There's no sneaking around it unless you're a cat, since the door is kept locked to protect curiosities visitors can only see certain times each year. Inside are relics from the dairy, a stereoscope, wooden frieze scenes from Huck Finn, Tom Sawyer, and enough of the house's history to satisfy a public bard from the house itself. But happily, the barn obliges. 6. Barns have been reliably read for hundreds of years, wedded to landscapes, faithfully functional, and accordingly more stable than old houses people routinely rehab, raise, or redecorate beyond recognition. Is there a more iconic structure or style? I admire most the wide floorboards, square nails, the clutter of ropes and clatter of hooves that resound still in silence, and the layers of paint atop skins of old remedies like linseed oil, lime, iron oxide, skimmed milk. Even the barns that stand tall as Lincoln's stovepipe never seem to get their due but remain America's best side, nostalgia in its purest form. All right, and I think this is it now. I know it's not Quarry Farm, but that's too great a photo not to put up there, right? What can I do? This is my last poem. Short term, I remember all things routine, acts of repetition elbowing their way past the fray, like my kitchen confinement, bare bulb outpost, the long trek with phone flashlight through viscous darkness, past antiquities and the smell of old furniture and stories upstairs, to books stacked on the arms of a regal chair, my robe a knitted throw left behind as an act of kindness by an artist whose residency also was shivery. Nighttime solitude mostly stands out, the still unsettling feeling that maybe I wasn't alone. But why not first thoughts of magic, the pure cohesive joy of being a small gear inside a colossal timepiece, stopped yet accurate? Later, maybe. Memory is a big brother that picks on you sometimes, but mostly looks out for you, even if he's late to the party. Big brother is the one who picks up a brush and whitewashes your fence, so all you recall afterwards is that beautiful picket smile. Thanks.